All right. What's going on, everybody? Hope you guys are well. Let's get this balanced here a little bit. Make sure it's on where it needs to be. All right. I think that's all right, y'all. Still making sure that I'm back from all the technicals. It looks like things are going okay. Hope everybody's well. Shout out to y'all. Welcome back to the Onyx Report, Black Masculinist news for the day. Yeah, got a number of things to cover. What's up, Queen Kalila? I see you in there. Maggie, what's good? Starting to get a number of women coming into the channel that are supportive and down. Although, I can say both have been down for a minute. Black Man Swimming, what's going on? Very little in the house, dropping information on the channel. Much appreciated, Barry. Thank you for that. I don't take none of that for granted, so I appreciate those who've been down doing that kind of work. Ghetto User, what's good? Poor Man's Passport Guide, what's happening? Hope you guys are well. Shout out to Aquatechy in the house. No one, what's good? Got Anthony in here. Barry drops the first. I think it's, no, it's actually the third. I'm going backward, but he dropped the third. Appreciate that support. $10 support says salute Doc, Onyx Brotherhood. Put some respect on the good doctor's name with the like for the algorithm. Share this broadcast, become a member, donate, support independent black male media. Appreciate it. Couldn't say it better myself. Like, share, subscribe, join, and donate. Support the channel so we can continue to bring you this independent black male thought. So shout out to Barry for dropping that. Andre, what's good? Busy Mike. We got Big Mo in the house. What's happening? Sane African. Layman's Journal. And if y'all ain't seen Layman's Journal's last, it's not a film review, but more of a character analysis on the film Soul Food, you're missing out. Definitely go to the Layman's Journal channel, check that out. He's been dropping them. I understood he went through some copyright stuff to get that one up. I think it took an extra month before he could actually post it. So he dropped it Wednesday, and if you haven't checked it out, you're missing out. So go check that out. Let's see here. We got the house. We got Castlevania Kid. What's going on? You know, shout out to those that came through early. So appreciate that. Urban Naturalist, what's up? Membership. What's going on? Shay Sade in the house. She might have, I don't know if she's still here, but shout out to Shay Sade. You should also be checking out the Shay Sade channel. Really good sister doing some good work over there. Much appreciation to her. Chef Mike, what's good, man? LM, what's happening? Mark Tuggle, always good to have you in here, man. Mark, always dropping a good word. So appreciate that, man. Let's see, I'm missing out. Okay, a few more came through. Let me shout out Ghetto User. Says, I'm in the tray early tonight. I appreciate that. Inspired by Truth says salute to you as well. Appreciate that donation. So y'all know what it is. You see the options on the screen. You got the Patreon, the Cash App, PayPal, Venmo, as well as the Super Chat. You can also become a member on YouTube by not only subscribing, but hitting the membership button, or you can become a patron on Patreon. And if you take the $10 mark or anything above that, you'll have access to everything that's there, as well as our monthly film reviews. And the last one BGS and I did, I want to say last Sunday or Monday, we did a review of American Fiction. Right? So interesting movie. And I think I'll post a little clip from it. I forgot to do that earlier today, but good film. So you can check out our review of it by hitting the Patreon membership and becoming a patron for at least the $10 or above mark. You can also become a patron of the channel, the Onyx Report, as well as the Institute for Black Male Studies, or buy some merch in the Institute for Black Male Studies page. So that is also an option available to you. And of course, you must. This thing is getting real testy. Again, get those upgrades on your PC, and you gotta start from scratch sometimes. This is ridiculous. Anyway, that said, I was gonna say, if you would support the book, if you haven't done so already, Solutions for Anti-Black Misandry, Flat Blackness, and Black Male Death. So go ahead and do that so we can continue to develop this kind of work. So please make sure you do, and we can keep it pushing. So thank you for the support, particularly for those that have already purchased the book. If you haven't yet, you can get it on you can get an online version, of course, or you can go ahead and get the printed bound version. So either way, support if you would, so we can continue to do what we do. Let me see. Yeah, and shout out to Quanos, wishing tax. Appreciate that. Speaking of taxes, just finished mine, so if you've not finished your taxes, make sure you don't let April sneak up on you. Get that out of the way and done, if you will. And lastly, make sure you subscribe, because we're trying to get to the 40,000 mark. So we're not there yet, but with your help we will be soon. We're at a little over 38,000, so help us get over the hump. It would be greatly appreciated. So make sure, especially if you've been listening and just dipping your head in, go ahead and subscribe. You got nothing to lose, right? And at the very least, if you're not able to support or donate monetarily in any of those ways, at least hit the like button, as was said earlier. So shout out to y'all. What's up, Indigo? Good to see you. Ruthless, what's happening? Let's see. So a number of things to cover, and we're actually going to start, provided that she's a forgiving computer this week. I'm going to go ahead and start with a little bit of a public service announcement, or at least 3 of them, to be honest with you. So the first one I want you guys to check out is a short that I ran across on YouTube. I saw the article a couple of months ago, and I meant to do a show on it. I got caught up, I think, grading papers at the end of the semester. But, a little occurrence that I think we, of all people, as supporters of Black men, should be up on. So, y'all check this out.
This is Taya from the Police Accountability Report, and I had to share this important update with you. For 7 agonizing months, Betterson Wade searched for her missing son, Dexter, and this mother's last hope was destroyed when she finally discovered her son, Dexter, was run over by an off-duty police officer the same night he went missing. But instead of being informed, she was left in the dark despite her calls to the police and the identifying articles he had on him. After months, she finally found her son in an unmarked grave behind a Jackson, Mississippi State jail. She visited her son's resting place to try to find some peace, but instead, she uncovered a travesty she could not have imagined. There were 215 other bodies thrown into shallow graves, unembalmed, with just a body bag and a number. Some of the bodies had even been desecrated by the elements and scavengers. There are families that are coming forward now to discover that their loved ones were lying disrespected in these shallow graves. Mayor Lumumba of Jackson said the death and burial of Wade was tragic, but not misconduct. Do you agree?
Okay. So, now, if this woman was the one that discovered the bodies, then it's nothing but appreciation to her for that. What I will say is something I've noticed since really after Michael Brown, especially via BLM, is that when they started to talk about the deaths of Black men in popular media, they began to channel it solely through how women experience those deaths, mothers in particular, but sometimes wives, sometimes even girlfriends. And I've even seen daughters, but I've rarely seen it channeled through the fathers who've lost their sons. I've rarely seen it through the sons who've lost their fathers, things of that nature, or even just a focus on the man who was killed. I rarely see that as well. It's always kind of generated and reflected through women's experiences, which, in and of itself, I think over time kind of, conditions people to only empathize if there's a woman involved. And I do think it can be that simple, that gross, that obtuse. But the idea that we can't empathize for men, I think, is quite common. And it's so deeply embedded in society that I think even in the Black community, when we see cases of men who've been killed, especially unjustly, we have a tendency to be oblivious to its impact. But find over 200, and I think, what did they say, 250 bodies just thrown out back behind a prison. And we know, based on the disproportionate numbers of Black men in particular who are incarcerated, that it is likely, statistically speaking, that a good portion of those men were Black. It's ridiculous. It's egregious. It's and to not even be told that your beloved family member or whomever is even gone, let alone where they are, and the elements, right, getting to them. It's ridiculous. So I wanted to, kind of do a twofold kind of observation where, one, we bring some light to the fact that this is out there and this has happened. And I doubt this is the only prison that this has happened with, but also to kind of recognize how, in order to get people to care, it seems to be filtered through how women experience these deaths. And if anything, highlight for us how little many think of a Black man's life in the first place. Shout out to Poor Man's Passport Guide. Shout out to Peasant to Legend. Shout out to MLR for the support. Just supporting my Black male scholars as always. Much appreciated, man. I want to catch up on still those. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I left the music on, but I didn't know if it was too loud. I see people posting in here. The music is still playing. Yeah, I didn't think it through. So hopefully it didn't bother you guys too much. If you couldn't hear the video, that's a whole nother thing. Dr. Thunder, shout out to you. Appreciate you. Gynarchy, what's up? Yeah. So if you guys couldn't, give me a 1 if you guys heard the video. Maybe I'll do it that way. You were able to hear what she said. Give me a 1. Philip says, Mississippi, goddamn, the place has been a hellhole for Black Americans for generations. My great-grandfather was disappeared. Wow. Okay, thank you. I got the 1. So, okay, so I'll make sure the music is lower if I play anything else or off. But I'm glad you guys could at least hear it. Somebody said there was a bit of an echo. All right. Well, we'll see if the video keeps, if there's any more echo as we go. All right, so thank you guys for that heads up. So that was the first one, public service announcement. We wanted to talk a little bit about that and put that on your radar. If you're not already familiar, you can look it up directly and, look into more detail about these men who were just cast aside after or while at this prison. The second one is a tragic story that I'm starting to see. I'm starting to see a lot, to be honest with you. In different ways, but I'm going to use this story to at least call some attention to it. See here. So this, as you can see, is the New York Post. Hearing something. Hoping it was just my fan. All right. So, New York Post, this is dated February 22nd. Former teacher of the year started suspicious fire that deleted her 4 young kids. Hours after posting, live each day like it's your last, right? There you go. That right there. So apparently, I think you can see some of the fire from inside the house in this image there, but that is the family. There's a Missouri teacher of the year started the suspicious fire that deleted her 4 young kids just hours after she posted on social media about living each day like it's your last, cops say. Bernadine Birdie Prusner and her children, twins Ellie and Ivy Prusner, 9, 5-year-old Jackson Spader, and 2-year-old Millie Spader, all perished in the blaze at their home in Ferguson on Monday morning. On Wednesday, the St. Louis County Police Department confirmed that investigators ruled the fire a murder-suicide. It is believed that Bernadine intentionally set a mattress on fire, as that was the point of origin for the fire. A note was left stating Bernadine's intentions to take her life and the lives of her children. The statement read without elaborating on the contents of the note. Around 12:15 Monday morning, a few hours before the fire broke out around 4:30, Prusner 39 posted about her children on Facebook. Says, all my kids peacefully sleeping in my bed, knowing they are loved so fiercely that I'd do absolutely anything for them, she wrote. This is my favorite moment. On Sunday, the Lewis and Clark Community College professor shared a grinning selfie of the young brood, us against the world. I'm so blessed to be their mama, she captioned the photo. Making today one of those live each day like it's your last kind of days. Prusner also wrote while detailing her plans to take the children to a soccer game and reptile show. At the time of her death, she was in an awful place due to ongoing litigation with her ex-husband and the father of her twin daughters. A statement from her loved ones circulated on GoFundMe explained. Says she and her ex, David Prusner, divorced in 2017 and shared joint custody of Ivy and Ellie through last year, when the father filed to block her plans to relocate to about 10 miles away to the St. Louis suburb of Creve Coeur. I know I've mispronounced that. According to court records, even though the new home would be closer to him, David Prusner was concerned about his ex-wife's proximity to her mother, whom she had allegedly described as psychotic. First case that I've ever had where the parent objected to the other parent moving closer to the other parent. Prusner was also facing a custody battle with her ex-boyfriend, Jared Spader, who was the father of Jackson and Millie. David and Jared coordinated their efforts. She saw her children being used by their fathers as foils, and she viewed the process and system for resolution of those claims as cumbersome, tedious, and never-ending. The mom of four's family statement read. Now, this is interesting. She found that the fathers who were pushing for custody and wanting to have a say about where she moved to, she found that problematic. How many decades we've heard stories and or experienced, men in particular, these kind of demands being placed on them by women? Even adding in terms of, money and child support issues. You know how many, I've even had guests on the show that have pointed out how often their exes would take them to court, sometimes as a flex, simply because they could. Especially when the judge would make them responsible for their ex's court fees, lawyer fees, all of that. This is so common in terms of what men experience, and it seems like she took her and her 4 children's lives in response to these 2 men for something that women do to men all the time. This is sad, but it's not a new thing. So you can see the house there after the fire. But it's interesting that this particular article would even have a phrase like this. She saw her children being used by their fathers as foils. How many mothers have used their children as foils toward the fathers? Many of whom didn't even have custody. Even if he's been demonstrated to be the better parent, courts tend to lean toward mothers, historically speaking. Each day that Birdie would score a step forward, her ex-husband and her former boyfriend would undertake an action to denigrate or undermine her role as a mother. Bird. That's what they did. You had 2 baby daddies, and they were getting on your nerves, fighting to be involved in their children's lives in a manner that you interpreted as interrupting how you parent your children you had with them. But we're going to act like this is a new thing, right? Cohen told the Post he agreed with the family statement and noted that Prusner earned less than $60,000 a year and struggled to keep up with the costs of legal jockeying. Sounds to me like she was getting child support from at least 2 men while working as a professor at a community college, and money issues coming about from going back and forth in court started to bother her. Even so, Cohen said he never suspected that his client, who was awarded the Missouri Teacher of the Year Award from the American Board for Certification of Teacher Excellence in 2013, was a danger to herself or her children. I wonder if the father's involvement, both fathers' involvement, had anything to do with any perceived instability. Like, did they see anything in her that the courts would not recognize? and if that might have been a part of the reason why they were involved. I mean, she herself called her mother psychotic. And so one of the fathers took issue with her moving closer to her mother. So I wonder if there's anything there as far as that. It's really strange, he said of the murder-suicide ruling. This entire week, I've been asking my staff, did I miss it? She was one of the rare clients you get in a family law that's not only upbeat, but was not putting on a show. Picture of the fire. Last week, the ex-husband pulled another move. Last thing I said to her was, don't worry, Birdie, we'll kick this one down too. Apparently, I missed every sign. Owen lamented. As of Thursday, the GoFundMe started by Prusner's relatives raised over $12,000 of its $15,000 goal. Jared Spader also released a statement on behalf of himself and David Prusner. Okay, so the baby daddies have united in a response. As dads right now, we have to focus on honoring the 4 beautiful lives, and we plan to do that together. The devastated dad said, while also thanking the community for its support. The GoFundMe in honor of Jackson and Millie Spader raised over $36,000, 3 times its $12,000 goal. So, yeah. And looking at some of the faces, might have been some interracial stuff. So one, if not both, of the baby daddies, it'd be interesting to kind of know what their background is. But yeah, but the reason I showed this is not really just about her case, but I've seen a number of cases. There's been a bevy of cases in the last 6 months that I've been I usually, post more regularly on Facebook than I do shows on YouTube. Often that's just, so I can kind of keep up. But I've seen a number of cases where you have women, and Black women in particular, who are deleting their children. Sometimes themselves, a lot of the time not. Cases where women are, literally packaging kids in suitcases until they die, leaving them out in the woods. There's been a couple cases of leaving them out in the woods. One of the latest being that this mother left her kids in the rain and the freezing temperature in the woods for over 11 hours until both kids died. I mean, these things are happening more and more often. I do think that they are tied to, the economy and the pressure and the stress that tends to come with limited access to resources. I do think there's a tie, and I do believe it is across race. I don't think this is limited to the Black community at all, but I am seeing more and more of this kind of thing happening, and it's sad. It's sad. It's frustrating, and obviously these kids, have nothing to do with it. But I've been seeing more of them, and it's really, becoming a trip. So, if you run across more of these cases, let's actually pool them together and really start to see if we can identify, some of what's going on here, because this is just getting sad. It just really is. So that said, the last public announcement that I think I will make has to do with comics. So we're going to end the public announcements on a slightly lighter note, especially as it pertains to deleting children and all. But we're looking at the comic book industry, and in this instance, Marvel, and their return or attempt at a return to prominence in response to years of Disney, MCU films, DEI influenced materials, where you have, diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI. You have these groups that are prominently or have been prominently hired in many a corporation and in university setting, where, they're having an influence on what's being produced. And this has caused a great deal of problems. I mean, I was just watching the new Avatar live action series on Netflix, and already with the feminism, quick, where you have male characters just being, dismissed as stupid, ineffective, clumsy, and of course the female characters that are smarter, better, more capable, and can do easily whatever a man can fail at doing without any problem. I mean, we're still seeing these constant tropes being given to us through media that women are just better beings. Men are essentially ineffectual and incapable, cowardice, and lack intelligence, lack empathy. It's these kind of things are still common in media. I'm only episode 2, and they're already prominent with the feminism, right? So it's so constant that we're seeing this everywhere. What's interesting about this Ultimate Spider-Man, I've been a comic collector for about 45 years, so I'll try not, I really want to keep it light and not go through a whole bunch of history. But what's happening here is there's kind of a reboot to the Ultimate Universe in Marvel. And this reboot is not the exact same Ultimate Universe that came out a number of years ago. It is a new Ultimate Universe where you have an alternate version of Reed Richards who has created this new universe, but has eliminated how the heroes originally got their powers. So he's come in through time and tweaked little things so the heroes never get their powers. So what you have happening with Ultimate Spider-Man is you have a fully grown Peter Parker who works at the Daily Bugle, is well-adjusted, intelligent. He's in his mid-30s. He has 3 kids with Mary Jane. So, the writers have connected him to Mary Jane, and they're a happy family. Matter of fact, Aunt May is not the one that lives. She actually passes away, and it's Uncle Ben that works at the same paper with J. Jonah Jameson and Peter Parker. So it's a whole different telling. And in this, Peter is actually offered his powers and told that somebody has prevented him from getting them the way he was supposed to at 16. So he chooses to take his powers. Right now, I think they're on issue 2. And I gotta say, from what I've seen, it's brilliantly written, brilliantly done. It may actually mark the return of the comic industry in one way, shape, or form. This last number of years has seen the closing of comic book companies all over the country. I mean, the writing has been so piss poor. Readers have moved on to manga. Comics have been, circling the drain for quite a while now. But this particular series represents a couple, because Batman has a series. There's a number of characters that are, experiencing some resurgence. And it looks like they may actually be able to pull some stories out that get mass support. Now, the problem, and the reason I bring this up here, is because Black men find ourselves at the crossroads. Whether it's white-run, mostly white male-run comics, the way we've grown up seeing, or it's heavily DEI influenced, what we find is that Black men still end up at the bottom. When it was white-run, we were mainly sidekicks, right? Ancillary to the story. We were sometimes the magical Negro, oftentimes the friend that is really there for the white hero for reasons that aren't even that clear. Why they're so dedicated, but still stay. And we see this in film too. When we started to see the rise in these DEI products, they were very much a reflection of intersectional feminism, right? Intersectionality, right? Where the idea was to put identity on this hierarchy of race, class, sex, gender, so on and so forth. And whoever was considered the more oppressed would be at the top and would be the priority. And then you get all the way down to the most privileged. So of course, white men are at the bottom of that list. Black women, especially if they're Black, poor, LGBT, they're the most privileged, so on and so forth. What that ended up watering down into over the years, especially on film and in media projects like this, was this kind of marginally sliding scale. And in that scale, because Black heterosexual men are, have penises, we got aligned with white men. Right? And so the idea of taking down the patriarchy became prominent, and Black men found themselves being pushed out. If you doubt me on that, even though you don't see a lot of Black men in these series, go back and watch the MCU in the last number of years. You have sidekicks, even with Falcon, who's supposed to be, Captain America in this latest film that they said is really failing. They've had to do a lot of reshoots. It's supposedly behind the scenes, it's a mess. You have an unpowered Falcon who's supposed to take over as Cap, right? But let's look at what happened with Black Panther. They killed off the character because the actor who played him died. This was a DEI influenced decision behind the scenes as far as what the story of Black Panther would be on the screen and in the comic books for some extent. They didn't kill off T'Challa entirely, but last I checked, he's no longer king of Wakanda. Right? So you have all these other identities that have stepped forward to kind of put him in the background of his own book. And in the films, it only got worse because they capitalized on the death of Chadwick Boseman and eliminated him altogether. Now, there's some rumblings that since he has this son being raised by a single mother outside of Wakanda, and I think they named him T'Challa too, that, he might be the T'Challa we grew up with in the comics, but we'll see. The point I'm getting at here is that Black men find themselves at a crossroad because regardless of who's putting these comics out, either Black men are sidekicks and lesser beings, less powerful, less intelligent, less capable on the white male end of it, or they're lesser beings because they're not women or gay or straight or LGBT. And if they're not in the spectrum altogether or women, they're less important. So on either side of this dynamic, Black men find themselves on the out, which is why I think many of us have been kind of developing a serious indifference to how, these projects present us in terms of giving our money, because neither has really catered to us to any great extent. So now we're seeing a rise in conservative men who are starting to speak up and challenge this dynamic. But we know at the end of the day, just like with this Ultimate Spider-Man 2 book, if they get their way, they're not going to be upset if comics go back to being lily white. And as much as we don't support that, at the same time, when you look at DEI influenced projects, they don't mind that it be diverse in every way possible as long as straight Black men are not present. And if we are, we're just representatives of patriarchy that needs to be dismantled and taken apart. So this is the dynamic we're facing when it comes to actually, finding a place in these projects. And so you've had many who've taken to creating their own independent books and moving from that vantage point, because we know we don't find ourselves there. So I just kind of wanted to put that on the table because it says something about where we fit in this dynamic. So, and I think the same thing, shout out to Sports Droppings, appreciate that support. I think the same thing is happening with the next presidential election as well. I think Black men are looking at both sides of the dynamic and not seeing any serious reaching out from either side. And what that does, in whether it has to do with media or politics, is it leaves a population of voters who are basically free of any, serious marriage to any one ideology. And as we've created the 18-point black male political agenda, we've started to pivot into a position of making sure we vote for who entertains our interests more so than what party, decides to either, lure our votes and then ignore us for 4 years, or make some shiny tennis shoes to get our attention. Either way, I think we're moving to a position of, these are our politics. Let's have a conversation with who engages those politics. Shout out to Dr. Thunder for your support. Appreciate that. Shout out to I Am Waff. Says, would love for you to review my comic once completed. All right. Go ahead and send that too. Dr. Thunder said, take some of my sandwich money, sandwich gang. That is his, I believe his Cash App. So if you guys, or at least, you can check that out, support Dr. Thunder as well. Shout out to Dragon Hero for the 10. He says, have you seen the recent data coming out that shows single fathers being better at raising children than single mothers? Kids end up having less debt, better mental stability, and are well adjusted. I have run across it, but I'd like to see whatever latest article you may have run across. Feel free to send it to me. Let's see, Sports Droppings again. Thoughts on the Madam Web flop? It is par for the course at this point. It's it's an indication that where these comics have been going, where these movies have been going. You can't disrespect your primary base and act like they don't exist. But that goes into my point. Black men have been comic book readers and writers and artists, since the 40s. We've created our own books and projects since the 40s, as well as fought for space in some of the mainstream, projects. And so Black men have been fighting for generations to be recognized. And I've said this before, it's a bit of a slap in the face to see us baited and switched when we finally do get a foot in the door, and then we get replaced for other demographics that have never expressed anywhere near as much interest in these areas as we have. And this is what I said about, making Shuri the next Panther. They gave her the title and took away T'Challa's most brilliant power for a demographic that never cared about comics to the extent that Black males did. Comics were always a male industry. And they're trying to, replace the male audience, I think, with a younger female audience, but it's not working. It's not working. Shout out to The Real Ambition. This is Pae's big bro. I've been following for about a year. Finally caught you live. Welcome. Glad to have you in here. Appreciate that. Okay. So there was that. So just kind of putting that on the table. Be interested to hear your thoughts and where DEI is taking us. And of course, we're seeing Disney falling apart in front of us right as we speak, while debating about whether they're going to continue to double down, as they seem to want to do, versus lose more billions. And I do say billions, not millions. They have lost billions on this agenda. And it is not helping. So that being said, I want to start with, as we transition to the primary topic, right? So you guys know the show is called Have Black Women's Love of Resources Permanently Driven Black Men Away? Now, this subject started with a letter I got from a subscriber. There's a little bit of length on it, so I appreciate your patience. I'm going to go through this a little bit. Steve Phillips says, this is an opportunity for us to do Black Hollywood, Nollywood animation joint ventures. Nollywood animation is really stepping up to be a level as other animation. All right, give me some projects to check out. Good to hear that. Shout out to Brandon Gamble. What's up, Doc? Good to see you in here. Appreciate that. Ian coming through. He says, good work, Doc. There's so few spaces where Black men can express themselves. Thanks for holding it down. No doubt. Hashtag Shuri is not Black Panther. Right. And a lot of the defense has been, well, it happened in the comics, but this DEI push happened in the comics before it happened in the films. So it was as much an intrusion then as it is in the films now. And what they ended up doing with Panther, I was never a fan of. But to take something where you had Shuri as Panther for a short number of issues, and in the second film, replace Panther with her, even though when you look at the books, he'd been out since the mid-60s. Shuri didn't come around as Panther, till a little bit ago. And that was only for a few issues. So again, make whatever, heroes you want to make. I'm not saying there's plenty of women's, nothing. This idea that they create new women heroes because there aren't any. If you've actually read books, which we recently found the filmmakers had been actually urged not to read books, there have been scores of female characters for generations, even LGBT characters. So, I'm not against saying more, but what I am against is taking characters. I don't like the race swapping thing, and I definitely don't like the empowering thing, but I really don't like just the dismissal of Black male characters as long as they want to have some presence. And that's one of the things I take issue with. Shout out to R Jizzle. Appreciate that support. So anyway, let's get to this. So I want to read this letter. So this is the letter that opened a series of questions up for me. More bouncing around in my head before I got the letter. So the letter just reinforced that I should continue to do it. So anyway, I'm not going to put it on the screen, but I will try and read through, and I'll see if I can skip anything. But we'll see. So he says, and shout out to Liz. He says, I wanted to share observation I developed over the past 2 weeks regarding the passing of Dr. Antoinette Candia Bay at Lincoln University and resignation of Harvard University President Claudine Gay. Now I'm gonna, I think I have, here we go. I'll put them on the screen. So that is, Claudine Gay on the right, and of course Antoinette Candia Bailey. And if I'm mispronouncing Candia, I apologize. Candia Bailey on the left. And she committed suicide not too long ago. And as we know, President Claudine Gay stepped down after accusations of plagiarism as the president of Harvard. And of course, there were also some other issues in regard to the students' support of Palestine over Israel. And she was, punished for basically not acting swiftly enough to push back against the students as far as that was concerned. Not long after he had the accusations of plagiarism, which, by the way, were not limited to her. There were other officials at other universities, namely Black women, who were also accused. And we'll get to that in a second. I'm not going to cover all of it, but we're seeing a rash of Black women in positions of power who are being taken down in the court of public opinion. It's getting somewhat brutal. But the letter continues. My observation does not have as much to do with Doctors Candia Bailey or Gay personally, however. The reaction from African American women, and in particular, the conversation around solutions to improve the quality of life regarding African American women in academia, as seen concerning the aforementioned doctorates. Right? It continues. I have seen on social media, especially LinkedIn, as a professional networking site, the outpour of Black women mid-grade professionals and career professionals, women, discuss the events surrounding both doctors and the expression of solidarity Black women have seemingly displayed as a response to the events surrounding them. I noticed much of the solution, as it were, based conversations with many of these professional Black women revolve around A, forming more Black female support groups. B, fostering more inclusive spaces for Black women in the corporate professional environment. And C, having more Black female leadership. D, soliciting funding opportunities for Black females. And E, essentially expanding both dialogue and action items around improving the quality of life of Black female. And he puts this in all caps, Black female life in the workplace and academia. So he lays out points A through E as something he's observing in social media and on professional sites like LinkedIn. Right? So A, forming more female support groups. B, fostering more inclusive spaces for Black women in corporate professional environments. C, having more Black female leadership. D, soliciting funding opportunities for Black females. And E, essentially expanding both dialogue and action items around improving the quality of Black female life in the workplace and academia. He says, my main point is that nowhere in any conversation surrounding the passing of Dr. Candia Bailey or the resignation of Dr. Gay have I seen any dialogue incorporating Black men into the solution, let alone the mention of Black men at all. It's just surprising that I do not see the mention of Black men as part of the help, assistance, or solution for Black women regarding these unfortunate events which affect the husbands and sons of Black women by extension of relations. From a sociocultural perspective, the invisibility of Black men as fathers, brothers, sons, and husbands to Black women is seemingly becoming more pronounced over time and effectively substantiates something you have mentioned as I paraphrase. Black women as a distinct racial and gender demographic have an entirely separate vocabulary, agenda, perspective, and outcome regarding their existence in this society. They operate as an entirely separate unit from Black men. And so he's saying that he's seeing evidence of this in the response to two Black women's experiences in the academy. Right? And you know, if you've been a long-time supporter of this channel, we've been talking about this for years, and it kicked up during the pandemic. So we started to talk about it then, especially as we saw corporations jumping out of their skin trying to provide resources for Black women while ignoring Black men. And we've even seen social media presentations where women are literally dancing in the aisles at a couple of things, at Black men's absence from these discussions about extending resources, all the way to Black men's deaths in regard to the men that they don't like Kevin Samuels as an example. So this wedge between Black men and women is being stoked by this outside influence, this outside cachet of resources that are primarily being given to one group, while that not only is the group in question giving the resources ignoring Black men, but Black women themselves who are getting these resources are ignoring Black men. And his point is that they're not only ignoring professional Black men that are in these same spaces and suffer from the same issues, if not worse, depending on the statistics. He's also saying that Black women themselves are not even bringing up their own sons, husbands, etc., and actually mentioning why they should receive those resources as well. This is something it directly impacts us, and we're seeing how this is happening. So he's pointing this out, and he's kind of basically telling me that what I've been talking about, he's seeing firsthand from his own experience. He says, I do not mean for this message to be long. However, I just wanted to share my observation because to me, it is quite telling indirectly of what Black women think of regarding a solution to the issues that affect Black women. That is, there is no place for Black men in the struggles that ail Black women, and therefore Black men are alien to any solution Black women can conceive to improve the quality of their life and outcomes in the society. He said, I see another scandal brewing at Harvard with another Black woman accused of plagiarism, right? And I presume Black men again will not be viewed as an agent who could help assist Black women to any regard concerning these societal issues that afflict us both as a racial and cultural group. Okay, and here he brings up, let me see. No, that's not, hold on. Okay. Where I put it. Oh, there it is. My bad. All right, so let me go ahead and put up, in the middle of the article, he links something he wants us to take a look at. Let me go ahead and pull it up. There we go. So he's talking about this piece in New York Post. Harvard's diversity chief hit with 40 plagiarism accusations in wake of Claudine Gay scandal report. All Harvard University's chief diversity and inclusion officer has been hit with dozens of plagiarism allegations tied to her academic work, including one claim she failed to properly cite her own husband's study. Interesting. The Ivy League school was handed an anonymous complaint on Monday listing at least 40 examples of alleged plagiarism by Sherry Ann Charleston dating back to 2009, a decade before she joined Harvard. The allegations, which include failing to properly cite other scholars' work and not referencing them in the footnotes, come just weeks after Harvard University President Claudine Gay resigned from her top post after becoming embroiled in a scandal over charges that she plagiarized work and her handling of anti-Semitism on campus. According to the Beacon, which conducted its own analysis of the complaint, Charleston allegedly quoted or paraphrased a dozen scholars without adequate attribution in her 2009 dissertation at the University of Michigan. The complaint also alleges Charleston ultimately took credit for a study that her husband, LeVar Charleston, currently the University of Wisconsin-Madison's Deputy Vice Chancellor for Diversity and Inclusion, wrote in 2012. Right, so there she goes. Now, what I think is also interesting about this, though, is you noticed that when we kind of saw her husband's title, of course, alongside his name, it became clear that there are men that are operating at this level. And this goes back to what, this letter is pointing out, that there are men in these spaces, some of whom, black men in particular, are in very powerful positions, but they're not being identified as not only suffering from the same issues, if not different issues, if not to a greater extent as black women, because we're finding many black men die at a younger age. Our life expectancy is much lower, especially when you're in high pressure, high stress positions, and the university is one. Right? We're not seeing any acknowledgement that black men deal with the same issues, or an acknowledgement that we can be a part of the solution and or should be even conceptualized as, receiving any kind of support in relation to, what these people are responding to. So it's interesting to kind of see this happen. Let me see. So he continues. He says, I thought this was interesting, the gynocentric expressions and focus surrounding these recent events that again condone the perceived invisibility of black men. All other groups of women depend on their men to some extent and does not exist in black America. Is there no need or want for black men to assist black women at any degree? Well, here's the thing. This is the public persona, and this is often what we hear from black women, sometimes directly, verbatim, in that fashion. But if you look at the person who's on the screen, you mean to tell me that this person has not at all benefited from having her husband, LeVar Charleston, currently the University of Wisconsin-Madison's Deputy Vice Chancellor for Diversity and Inclusion? You mean to tell me he hasn't been at all a resource for her? What I'm getting at is maybe not. I have no idea when it comes to these two individual people, but I have seen plenty of black men in powerful positions who advocate for black women. But the person who wrote the letter is right. When it does come to identifying problems that black folk are having and identifying solutions that black folk need, what I'm starting to see a trend of is women who are seeking their own counsel and they're conceptualizing responses to their conditions solely as a distinct group. And this is what I've been saying for years. Black men, on the other hand, tend to think very communally. We still operate with a kind of 1970s civil rights / black power, framework for how we understand what the black community is. We think about it in terms of community. And when we start to point out problems or frame solutions, it's always around this general idea of community. But women have been functioning on a very different paradigm for a while now. And their paradigm is about self. Not self as in do for self for the black community. Self as in do for self as a demographic. Now, there are some alliances between women and, say, LGBT groups, but heterosexual black men, and notice it's a mirror image of what I'm talking about in the DEI situation I just got done with. Whether you're talking about the academy or corporate America, almost every environment we're pointing out, it's the same dynamic where black men find themselves in a middle position where we can see the aggression, the hostility, and sometimes the blatant racism that may come from white society. And then at the same time, see black women operating on a solely different framework to themselves. While they have no problem accepting your resources, whether you're a husband or just a coworker, if you're providing a resource, they will happily accept it. But when you start to see this kind of identification with solutions, whole different thing. And I noticed the same thing even firsthand at Fresno State. I've been involved in programs, and this goes back to being an undergrad. I've seen all kinds of programs that were supposed to be framed around everything from community support to student support in regard to the Black community, right? And as long as there were women in positions of authority who were heading up these discussions, often what I would see was that there would be a priority for female students or, women and girls in the community. Boys, almost always, even in the conceptualization of whatever the project was, would fall to the wayside. And then when you fast forward a little bit to where the programs that I was involved with started to actually see fruits, the boys and men would always be on the low end of the totem pole. The women and girls would always be heightened and promoted. I've always noticed this. At every university I've been at, there tended to be more women than there were men. And when it came to student support, I saw the same dynamic. The girls would benefit, the women would benefit far more than the boys. There would always be a lower number of males there as well, right? Every Black graduation I've ever attended or been asked to speak at, because I've done a number of, given the primary lecture, graduations. When I would sit down and read through the programs, it would always be roughly 7 to 30, 80 to 20 kind of thing, right? Where 70 to 80% female, 20 to 30% male graduates. Nobody would say a word. And sometimes it's been less than that. Sometimes I've seen as low as 10 and nobody would say a word. So what's being pointed out in this letter has been going on for a while, right? And I've even seen it in regard to the resources that Black women have been getting from corporate entities, right? We're going to talk a little bit in a minute about what may be happening with some of those resources. But since 2020, especially, we've been talking on this channel about how those resources have been earmarked for Black women. Black women have said nothing about the needs of Black men, even when it benefits them in the long run to have partners who are able to traverse these issues and benefit and provide those benefits back in turn to the women they're associated with. Even that doesn't change how they see things. But even in those instances when these programs have been developed, what we've seen is highly placed Black women, often I would argue related to some kind of DEI dynamic, in these positions of authority, pushing from within corporate companies to increase the resources given, not to the Black community, but to other Black women. So I did a show on my channel a few months ago about whether Black women see themselves as a separate race. We have been seeing this for a while. I would argue, many of us did not have the language for that. We didn't have the vocabulary for it. We could not make sense of it, whether it was BLM, when they did the bait and switch on Black male death to switch to other topics more related to women and LGBT, or even something as subtle as watching Black History Month become 2 months of Black Women's History Month, right? Where you have Black History Month became kind of framed as a feminine thing, and then you transition to Women's History Month, and there's this continued celebration of Black women. In each of these instances, whether subtle or blatant, right, the elimination of the Black male presence, even from the conceptual stage, has become more and more apparent to Black men. But I don't think we really had a vocabulary to explain it. I know we didn't when BLM did that. We had no frame of reference. Many people saw BLM as the natural evolution of the Black protest tradition. We were not prepared to see Black male deaths used as a talking point to get us to think about something other than those Black male deaths, right? We weren't prepared for that. And I don't think we've been prepared for the rise in corporate sponsorship of Black women at our expense, especially when led by Black women from within those companies, regardless of how many Black men may have played a role in helping them get into positions, whether at home, as lovers, family members, or whatever, or as professional colleagues. Black men are not mentioned whatsoever in that dynamic. The only reason that this brother is mentioned in relation to this story is because, one, it's her husband, and two, she cited him she basically took credit for work that was a product of his study, according to this. That's the only reason he's mentioned. But the fact that he's there and has such a high position suggests that there are Black men there. If nothing else, I'm evidence of that as well. But are Black men acknowledged in that process? Not really. Oh, anyway. So, let's see. The letter's almost over. He says, even in the face of racialized prejudice and discrimination that results in a person resigning from their position or another committing suicide, and he's saying that with an exclamation point, we're still basically ignored. He says, black women seem to be on a comet headed into deep space and black men remain on Earth. Just my thoughts. And he asked for my thoughts along that. So Lewis, shout out to you for sending that. I know it took me a while before I did a show on it, but I wanted to kind of address that. But let's also look at the other person in question. So this is, stop that, share. Oh crap, cancel button here. Let me get it back on. This is Antoinette Bonnie Candia Bailey. And again, if I mispronounce her name, I apologize. All right, so this is a release at Lincoln University, Missouri, on her passing, dated January 11th of this year. It says the Lincoln University community is mourning the loss of beloved alum and leader, Dr. Antoinette Bonnie Candia Bailey. Dr. Bailey passed away earlier this week. She was a gifted colleague and always a passionate advocate for Lincoln University, HBCUs, and other causes in which she believed. Dr. Bailey had many friends in the Lincoln University community. As a Blue Tiger community, we grieve with them and send our deepest condolences to her family. Right. So there's been a lot of talk in Black academic, or Blackademia, as I sometimes call it, about her passing. And of course, as the letter stated, right, this got conflated with Dr. Gay and became a kind of overall call for attention and the needs of Black women in such spaces, void of Black men. So I would argue that if Black men were to press this, here's the thing. If Black men were to press for resources to, address their situation, I could see a lot of women providing verbal support, saying, oh, that's cool, y'all do your thing, until Black men actually get resources or the potential of it. And the reason I say that is when I think of Obama's My Brother's Keeper. If Black men said we're pushing for policy to benefit, as we are actually doing, to benefit Black males, I'll either hear silence from Black women or I'll hear, kind of passive verbal, well, you go, do your thing, good work, But then when it looks like it might happen, as we saw with the My Brother's Keeper program, Black women initiated a nationwide, list of people who opposed it, right? People who opposed it. Metacog, appreciate the support, says, gents, consider vasectomy. Damn. Especially if you already have a child, Black women will alienate you from you and your child. You'll recover faster from one child support check than from 2 or 3. Damn. Well, you got the vasectomy route. You also have the travel route. So there are a number of options there. Shout out to Dr. Gamble. He says, as a SCal University at California University, there is a Black women in academia group, but no Black men in academia group, and people seem to be on with it, be okay with this. Yeah. And I've talked about this on my channel before. I've not only taken part and had some direct experience with, but I've even had brothers calling me from different universities to say that they've sat on hiring search committees and they've watched a room full of Black women where they were often the only male present actually say at the beginning of the search, before there's anything discussed, before there's even any candidates, when you actually, because what you have to do when you're on a search committee, you have to put together the material that you're going to send out to people to tell people what the position you're hiring for is. And so what these brothers actually, has been a few, have called to tell me was, yeah, I've sat in these rooms and they will say from the beginning, before we even write up the job, description, that we're going to hire a Black woman for this position, even in departments that actually have a majority of Black women. Even within Africana Studies, which is the evolution of Black studies, So that being said, this culture that I think we're witnessing has been, prominent enough to be acknowledged, but I think a lot of men still don't know how to talk about it publicly and are very concerned with the blowback if they do. Let's see. The Tactical Insider says, Doc, remember the Detroit 300? It was a bunch of Black men that banded together to police the streets of Detroit after a Black girl was assaulted. You know what happened to the group? No. He says they were attacked by black women as a whole from Detroit and even sued and had legal action taken against them, basically disbanded the group. I had not heard that. If you have any articles to that effect, I'd like to definitely see them. But, you know, he says, or do you remember during the most peaceful protest when there was this point where Korean shop owners were specifically whooping black women for ratchetness? Remember what happened? Yes, I remember. It was one brother in particular that went to physical means to defend the women in the space, and they actually argued with him about it because they were worried about the shop closing and they not having access to the services anymore. Hair, nails, I think it was. I think it was hair mostly. Shout out to Dead Set. Good to see you, good brother. He says, I find self-mutilation to be destructive at the collective level, especially in an environment where high birth numbers will decide who dominates in the near future. All right. This is what I think, and I think there's a lot of black men across ideology that are having these kind of reflections. But again, most of us don't really know what to do with it. I think there are a lot of brothers that are really kind of confused at that. Right? But the cases we're seeing, hope nothing's going on, because that's usually the only time my phone is ringing is when something happened. But anyway, we're seeing I wanted to show one other example of black women in position being called out in a certain way. So we've seen the Fannie Willis videos. I may do something on that. There have been a number of, mayors and district attorneys, black women that have been called out for egregious behavior. This is another I haven't heard too many talk about, but Clayton State, this you can find, in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, right? And reads, Clayton State's provost ouster reflects more scrutiny of resumes, research, right? And so it says, Georgia, let me see. You can see it. Let me make it a little bit larger here. And close some windows we no longer need here. All right. So it says, Georgia University has joined schools in other parts of the nation navigating the fallout of an academic misrepresentation probe after its provost was ousted for inaccuracies on her curriculum vitae. So the curriculum vitae, or CV, is basically the resume of the academy. Usually more extensive. That's basically what it is. It's a resume where you're documenting publications and things of that nature. Kimberly McLeod was hired by Clayton State University to start in July to oversee academic programs for the nearly 6,000 student university. She was removed in late December after anonymous complaints, one lodged by a concerned faculty member, questioned the publication she listed on her application materials. Now, they got it behind a paywall that I did not have posed to me the other day when I pulled this article, but I am blocked from it now. But anyway, so it's not only a question of what's on her CV, it's also a question of, whether or not she actually participated in certain publications and to what extent. And apparently the accusations were strong enough to get her fired. She's been ousted. This is what we're seeing. Right? These kind of things are starting to happen to a greater degree than we had heard. But I want to also talk a little bit about this issue of suicide as it relates to Dr. Antoinette Bonnie Candia Bailey. Right? Because again, the push that Lewis is talking about in this letter for support in regard to what black women experience, especially around suicide, is very telling. And so let me kind of see if I can pull up a little bit of information. Let's see where black men stand in regard to suicide. So this is actually from my book. It's a section out of the book. This is, I want to say, page 77. So solutions for anti-black misandry. Let's read a little bit about where black men stand in regard to suicide. Shout out to Black Man Swimming. So I'm the Rotary Club president-elect in Clayton County. She wasn't the only one. What? Uh-oh. Hey man, if you tell us whatever you can, especially if you have a full number of how many people may have gone through that, let us know. I've never been to Clayton County. I'd like to know more about that. But I appreciate you dropping the word, Black Man Swimming, so let us know something. Dr. Gamble says, scary enough, Black women in the academy have stepped out so boldly with magic. They are forgetting the defense part of earning a thesis or dissertation. They think they're untouchable. Oh, yeah. That's definitely what we're seeing. But, let's see where Black men are in regard to suicide. So sometimes the rates are so astonishing that they're hard to comprehend. At times, the rate has been over 100%, has been a 100% increase, not only suicide, but sometimes the injury that can result from the attempt. According to the recent report from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC 2020, indicates that suicide is the third leading cause of death for Black males ages 10 to 34 in the United States. When examining rates of suicide among Black youth by gender, 164 adolescent females and 609 adolescent males died by suicide in 2017, right? That is nearly 6 times as many Black males. Between 1991 and 2017, suicide rates increased by 73% for Black youth, and injury by attempt increased 122% for adolescent males, Black males. This would suggest that Black males are engaged in more lethal means when attempting suicide. The latest data is no better, and without a significant push to change this practice, all indications suggest that this is targeted to get much worse. New data shows a nearly 80% increase in Black male adolescents attempting suicide since 1991. Suicide ideation has also increased, particularly for white, Black, and Hispanic women. But there's another one I want to show you. Just another sentence I think is important when we talk about self-deletion, as it were. And this comes from the African American Suicide Fact Sheet from as far back as 2006. It says males accounted for 90.5% of African American elderly suicide, 65 and older. Males accounted for 90.5. So whether we're talking about adolescents, grown men, or elders, I mean, the rule of thumb as it relates to suicide, and this is really across race, is that women attempt suicide in much higher numbers than men. But men complete suicide in much higher numbers than women. And that's no different in the Black community. As a matter of fact, if I'm not incorrect, the Black women's rates of suicide have dropped precipitously. Black men's, whole nother question. So even though I have nothing but respect for Candia Bailey and what she experienced, it's not something that Black men aren't experiencing. And yet, strangely enough, there's no mention. Again, I'll say, if Black men were to actually form their own frameworks around this, I think there would be some passive support from women. There would be, of course, individuals of women and LGBT that would be active. I'm never arguing that it's all or nothing. But I think more often than not, there would be an uproar if Black men actually started to receive the support they advocated for. An uproar. And yet, when you see these pushes for women, there's not a pushback. I'm not responding to 5,000 men in the academy that are pissed off that these women are organizing for themselves, and even if they get something, Black men don't, and they don't care. That's not what I'm seeing. There's one brother who wrote me a letter saying, I'm seeing this, and he's seeing this on publicly accessible platforms. It's not like we're seeing this in private email streams. This is on LinkedIn. This is stuff that's happening from university to university. And there are many that I can speak to who have directly talked to me about their experiences with this gender divide, even in the academy. And this is amongst people who've never heard of the manosphere or the gender wars. But the interesting thing is when you start talking to them about their lives, they can talk to you about divorce. They can talk to you about the impact of family court. They can talk to you about not having access to their kids, not getting custody, being arbitrarily accused of things they didn't do so that she could get an upper leg in the case against him. They could tell you stories that are something you hear about online all the time. Because what we try to talk about are based on things that occur in the environment, not just things we make up. So even when you have professional white-collar folk who are highly degreed and have never heard of a gender war or a manosphere or any of those talking points, when you get into their lives, as I say, when you get a beer in them and have to sit down and talk about these kind of things, you'd be surprised. The stuff that comes out is very reminiscent of the stuff we're talking about anyway. Much of the time, they don't know there's actually been a movement of men who's been responding to this very overtly. They have experience with it, but isolated experience, and they can talk to friends and colleagues that have had something similar, but they have no sense of scale in terms of to what degree these things are happening and to what degree men have begun to organize a response. Because we've never organized. There's never been a black men's movement, as it were. What we saw with the rise of feminism and then the rise of black feminism, black men did not have that movement. If anything, the closest thing to it is happening in this last 5 years. But it hasn't happened prior. So there are things that women have had access to for years that they take for granted. It's just part of our reality now. For men, it's inconceivable. Which, if you want evidence of what those things look like, go to the 18-point Black male political agenda, and you'll see some of the things I'm talking about. Shout out to Donnie. To the fall of the Jedi Order. Justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Someone is executing Order 66. We're going to get to that. We are going to get to that. Let's see. All right. Uh-oh. Take good brother down for me. All right. So let's look at a little more information in regard to suicide. So this is another one. I won't put this on screen, but I'll just read through this, paragraph I have right here. It says, according to the, okay, actually, I already included that in the book. All right. I'll try this one. But I should have. Okay. Oh, all right. I know where this is. Sometimes I am more prepared than I've given myself credit for. So I'm going to put a link in the chat. And this is for information on Black boys, men, and suicide. If anyone is interested in looking at where I'm about to pull, quote, that I am putting up on the screen now. So this is a section out of that book, and it basically has this page listed in facts about Black men and suicide. It says in 2014, 80% of suicide deaths in the Black community were men. Recent research has observed that Caribbean Black men in the U.S. have the highest attempt rate for the African American community. Firearms were the predominant method of suicide among African Americans, regardless of sex or age suicides. Suffocation was the second most prevalent method. Black men don't often recognize depression or trauma as an issue, therefore don't associate SI as a problem. Well, let's think about that a little bit too, right? Let's think about that a little bit. When you think about what we've seen in media, when you think, whether it's films or even animated shows for kids that try to bring up serious issues, or when you think about what's extended in the academy in regard to suicide, how much of it ever has to do with identifying Black males' unique experiences with it, right? What I often see is stories about men who are hurting family, abusing folks, and then off themselves. But a lot of the time, it really doesn't delve into anything that kind of helps us identify depression in Black men, especially when you consider the John Henry factor in regard to Black men's daily lives. Right? We are raised and have been for generations with this notion of sacrificing for others long past any kind of personal pain you experience. Sacrifice is one of the hallmarks of manhood, especially in the Black community. Right? The old adage about grandpa who worked a job he may have even hated for decades and died to make sure Big Mama got a house and continued to support her long after death in regard to life insurance and or a pension. Right? Now, obviously, the question of a pension these days and working 30, 40 years for one company are long gone. But the idea of Black men sacrificing themselves to take care of others is still prevalent. And that is the social standard that Black men are measured against. It's one we're socialized into in terms of displays of how much we love family and community. So it's still a social expectation that we have to endure. And yet there's very little credit given to it. So I would argue that there may be some difficulty between, exploring and being able to identify the differences between the stress of that kind of John Henry work ethic or set of expectations put against Black men versus depression. And I would argue that they often go together, but just to be able to identify it, most of us are not given much information. I wasn't gonna do it, but since I'm here, I will at least extend what this documentation suggests we do. Let me see if I can make this a little larger. This is still small on my screen, so I'm not sure how much of this is going to show up well, but I'll read through just a little bit of it to make sure we can at least benefit from some of the ideas here while I have you. I said I wasn't going to do this, but since you're here, we might as well look at a little bit of this. And this is basically about 6 signs of depression in Black men. At least 7% of Black men will experience depression in their lifetime, and it starts with an increase in physical pain or chronic medical issues. Right? Damn it. Sorry. Having some sound issues with me. Okay. Hopefully it's a little better. Anyway. So the number one thing is an increase in physical pain or chronic medical issues. Number 2, a loss of focus. Right? It says depression can slow down a man's ability to process information, thereby impairing concentration on work or other tasks. The first one, for physical pain and chronic medical issues, says chronic pain and digestive issues can be related to depression. And the second one was talking about focus. The third deals with anger. Men at times manifest hostility, aggressiveness, and anger. When depressed, it's more than irritability and can strike at the smallest things. Number 4, substance abuse. Men often engage in substances such as alcohol or marijuana to numb the pain as a coping skill. Substance abuse can be a trigger to increase depressive symptoms. Right? Number 5, sexual dysfunction. Men are less likely to report erectile dysfunction when depressed, which can cause depression to women. To worsen. It's hard to read. Yeah, but I do think, okay, I'll reread it. So men are less likely to report erectile dysfunction when depressed, which can cause depression to worsen. There we go. Many suffer from sexual dysfunction due to medical conditions, medical medications, which can cause depression. Excuse me, it's really small print, so I'm trying to read it. So I apologize. I'm stumbling over a few words. Number 6, this is the final one, suicidal thoughts. Men are 4 times likely to die by suicide, and 7 to 8 Black men die daily from death by suicide. There you go. But we're going to have conversations about everything under the sun except for Black men. Interesting. Okay. So, something to consider. Now, the other reason after the letter I received that I wanted to do the show was I saw this piece right here. Okay. So I hate when they do that. They change the article. Hold on. Let's see if I can get the article back up again. All right, so here we go. No, I guess I did. All right, so congressional leaders reintroduced bipartisan Protect Black Women and Girls Act. This is February 14th of this year, right? And the image changed on the screen, so I thought they changed the article, but let's go. It says a bipartisan group of lawmakers has reintroduced a bill that would establish a task force to examine the conditions and experiences of Black women and girls in America. Democratic reps Robin Kelly, Yvette Clarke, Bonnie Watson Coleman, co-chairs of the Caucus of Black Women and Girls, joined Representative Brian Fitzpatrick, Republican, in reintroducing the Protect Black Women and Girls Act on Wednesday, more than 2 years after it was first introduced. Simply acknowledging our country's history of targeted discrimination, harassment, and violence against Black women and girls will not correct years of systemic racism and sexism, Kelly said in a statement. We must leverage the full weight of the federal government to seek justice for Black women and girls who deserve an equal opportunity for a full, happy, healthy life. Racial disparities in healthcare, salary, and education disproportionately affect Black women and girls. Black women die from pregnancy-related complications at 3 times the rate of white women, and a study by the Black Women's Blueprint found 60% of Black girls experience sexual assault before they're 18. Sexual assault, be mindful, it's a very fraught term. It can include quite a bit. So, terms like that are used to shock, but you'd be surprised what's included in that list. And sometimes, if those accusations are not founded on anything related to evidence, it can become an even bigger problem. But anyway, says, meanwhile, Black girls are 4 times more likely to be arrested at school and 5 times more likely to be transferred to another school for disciplinary reasons than their white counterparts, according to data from the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights. When it comes to salary, Black women are paid 67 cents for every dollar a white man makes. We've been talking about that one for years. Let's see. Fitzpatrick says these disparities have persisted for far too long. Watson Coleman said the bill will help identify and address the root causes of these challenges facing Black women and girls. Now, question. Do you think Black men are going to organize a petition to stand against this the way Black women did when it came to Obama's My Brother's Keeper program? And mind you, the My Brother's Keeper program wasn't federally funded. It was supposed to be philanthropically funded. So it wasn't even about federal resources finally identifying the difficulties of Black male life. It was a philanthropically funded entity, right? And it wasn't even earmarked for just Black males. It was Black and Latino males, to my understanding, right? And women went apeshit. Even though there was already a White House Council for Women and Girls, right? There's already a White House Council for Women and Girls. There wasn't one for men and boys. But now we're seeing the call for, one for Black women and girls. And I will bet money that Black men are not going to raise a nationwide protest against it, despite the fact that on many different metrics, Black boys and men are worse off. They won't do it. They won't do it. And if anybody tried to, it would not have the national traction that we see Black women initiated against Black men. I find it interesting. The audacity, if nothing else. The bill would require the task force to identify policies and programs at the federal, state, and local levels designed to improve outcomes for Black women and girls and make recommendations for improvement. Really? The task force would also submit recommendations to Congress, the president, and each state government on policies, practices, programs, and incentives that should be adopted to improve their outcomes. Lastly, the bill would direct the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights to conduct a study and collect data on the effects of economic, health, criminal justice, and social service factors on Black women and girls. Throughout our nation's history, Black women have remained marginalized, overlooked, and underserved in communities across the country, said Clark. Every American, including Black women, deserves the chance to create their own American dream. Everybody but Black men and boys, that is. What I would say is this looks like the kind of thing. I was trying to find the image that it posted up as a thumbnail for the article itself, but I'm not seeing it. Anyway, I would say this looks like the kind of thing that they produce to, again, try and lure in votes, but I don't think it's really designed to do anything. I mean, whenever you see them talking about they're calling for studies, they're calling for entities to make recommendations to Congress, it looks like, just another nothing burger. But to the extent that it might actually yield resources, which is something we have seen happen with Black women and girls, it's interesting to see how alienated Black boys and men are from anything like this. It's interesting to see. And yet it keeps happening, and we act like it doesn't. But there is a strange kind of pushback that we are starting to see. And Dr. Thunder knows about this. I think he did a show on this. There's some material sent out, especially from Dr. Neal, who, shout out to that good brother. You know what? Matter of fact, I should have done this already. But I'm going to. All right. Let me put up the book. One second, bear with me. I want to do the brother right. Let's see if I can actually save this thing. Okay. So it's fighting with me, but with your patience, I will be done in just a few seconds. And I will show you what I am talking about. Okay, so I do think that went through. So let me see if it did. I want to make sure brother gets some support. All right, so Dr. Neal shared some things with us, and I want to also make sure we support his book. So y'all go look for Beyond Death in Jail by Dr. Ronald B. Neal. Anti-Blackness, Black Masculinity, and the Demonic Imagination. Right? So shout out to Dr. Neal. Hope you're well, good brother. You know, putting the information out. He's still with us, doing this work. So y'all go check out Beyond Death in Jail. Support Dr. Neal. Right? So back to it. So this is what we're starting to see, though. Some of these programs, there's some pushback. And a lot of them are starting to come from conservative white male-led groups who are pushing back against these types of projects that earmark Black women as the sole beneficiaries of various types of resources. Now, Black men have been relatively silent about this kind of thing because for much of the time we don't directly benefit anyway. So there's kind of an indifference that I think takes place with many Black men. But this is coming off of Inc.com. And it's in their Diverse in Business section, February 21st of this year. It says it all fell apart. Fearless Fund founder on impact of DEI lawsuits. As conservative groups continue to go after DEI-based grant programs, the firms that provide them, including Fearless Fund and Hello Alice, are struggling. And they promise to fight back, right? Now, continues, it's been roughly 6 months since conservative groups began suing companies and investment firms that offer grant programs exclusively to historically disadvantaged groups, calling the funding discriminatory and therefore unlawful. Fearless Fund CEO Arian Simone revealed in an interview with Inc. that the conservative strategy is essentially working, and that her organization is on the ropes. Firm, which launched in 2019 and grew to a team of 19, has since scaled back to 6. It all fell apart due to litigation, says Simone. You're talking millions of dollars we've lost, and it's truly impacting our operations. Now, let me say this. In another show, I actually showed you the beneficiaries of groups like Fearless Funds and others, and of course, you saw scores and scores of Black women. And we found that the Fearless Fund did have something for Black men. It was much smaller in scale and scope, and then it disappeared. It was on the website, but then it didn't, you couldn't tell if it was still going or if it was defunct. It was only on one web page, and it was difficult to find out if anybody won it, got it, or whatever. But when it came to looking at their beneficiaries, you saw scores of Black girls and women, mainly, young women, who had benefited from this. So, as it pertains to these kind of projects, we are seeing that they are happening for Black women and girls, but not necessarily for us. Come on. There we go. All right, so getting back to this, let me see if I can enlarge it a little for you. See it. Just says we've lost millions of dollars. Damn it. She says, back in August, the American Alliance for Equal Rights, a nonprofit membership organization led by conservative litigator Edward Blum, sued Simone's Fearless Fund, an Atlanta-based venture firm. The suit claimed the Fearless Fund's grant program, geared toward funding Black women entrepreneurs, violated a section of the Civil Rights Act of 1866. The law, which was initially put in place to protect the right of anyone to win contracts regardless of race, is now being used to dismantle a private money effort designed to correct the imbalance of funding to historically disadvantaged groups. The lawsuit came 2 months after the firm received multi-million-dollar investments from Bank of America, Costco, and MasterCard in June 2023 to financially support and provide resources for women of color, according to the press release. For context, Black and Latino women entrepreneurs received 0.1% of VC funds, according to a 2023 study from McKinsey & Company. Following the suit, a judicial panel, hold on, I want to just see something with these studies real quick. I want to see if they have any charts. Underrepresented founders from the top funded startups typically receive less funding than their white male counterparts. They break see, this is why one of the points on the 18-point agenda is to disaggregate the data by race and gender. So far what I'm looking at in the study, I don't see any charts breaking down differences by race and gender, just race. Now they seem to have a quote in regard to women. All right, so let me try. The last ditch effort I'll try. Sometimes I just like to pull up these studies just to see what they say. Nope, there's no mention of Black men. Let's try. Doesn't mention women either. Okay. Oh. All right, hold on. So there's 24 mentions of women, not Black women, but women. You might be using another qualifier other than American or African American. Now there are a lot of mentions of men, but they're also including words like investment, and the MEN in it counts. So it's hard to determine, but I'm just going to quickly sift through to see if there's any mention of Black men, just out of curiosity. And the reason I'm doing this is, I've shown you studies, like for example, the one done on COVID a couple years ago, where the title of the article was how bad Black women have it. But then when you read the article, Black men actually had it significantly worse than everybody, and there was no mention. And it was because it was being put out by a gender studies office that, did not include Black men. So I've learned from that to just kind of ask the question when I'm looking through studies, when they make statements about how women have it, to see if they're pulling that same kind of game as it relates to men. Now I can tell you, actually looking through it, there are very few mentions of men. And the only time they seem to really mention men is when they're talking about white men in regard to what percentage of folk get resources in relation to white men. I'm not seeing any mention of Black men. Maybe I overlooked it because I just sifted through it, but I did do a search, didn't see it. So when you see these kind of statements like financial support and provide resources for women of color, it's interesting to kind of see if there's any mention of men of color. Because a lot of the time there isn't. They don't even mention women of color in the study that this is referring to, nor men of color. Well, that's interesting. Anyway, shout out to David White. Says, from Black Men, the official sponsor of Dr. T. Hasan Johnson, brought to head into work. Gonna catch the replay. Appreciate that support, David. Thank you. Sorry for going so slow, but I wanted to try and look into that linked study. And so far, I haven't found any mention of Black men or men of color for that matter. Anyway, following the suit, a judicial panel officially blocked the Fearless Fund from awarding $10,000 to $20,000 in business developed services to early stage Black women owned businesses as part of the firm's Fearless Strivers grant program. The grant program is now on hold. DEI funding dries up. So we're seeing this backlash against DEI, not only at Disney and MCU and comic book industry, and even at universities and other corporations. We're starting to see it, drying up in terms of grants as well. Over the past 4 years, the Fearless Fund has partnered with corporations to supply diverse business owners $3.7 million in grants. Now, according to Simone, all but 2 of the firm's partners have backed out. She says, I didn't plan for this. I'm definitely equipped for it, but I didn't prepare for the mental and emotional toll this has taken on me and my team. Simone adds that the venture side of the firm is also struggling. Since she started the fund in 2019, the co-founder and COO, Ayanna Parsons, it has invested nearly $27 million in roughly 40 women-owned businesses, including fast-growing startups. Slutty Vegan, Partake Foods, and I may have mispronounced Partake. For the lawsuit, the pair expected to raise another 8-figure round of funding to continue their investments since the lawsuit began. However, they haven't raised a single dollar. Fearless Fund isn't the only capital provider facing financial hardship following lawsuits. After right-leaning nonprofit American First Legal sued Hello Alice, an online platform for business owners, claiming its grant program for Black-owned small trucking companies was discriminatory. Co-founder Elizabeth Gore says the company recently had to lay off 69% of its workforce. Still breaks my heart, says Gore, who launched the company in 2017. It happened right before the holidays in December, and we had to lay off people who have been with us for years. Onslaught of litigation expected. Gore says the lawsuit has also greatly impacted her ability to raise capital. When Hello Alice was first sued in August 2023, she and co-founder Carolyn Rhodes were in the middle of closing a Series C funding round. Within 2 days of notifying investors about the suit, says Gore, entrepreneurs lost 2/3 of the entire round. So they're losing investors quick. And the damage may not be entirely done. The plaintiffs are pushing the suit toward class action status, which Gore believes could set a dangerous precedent. In essence, she says, it opens the door so that any white male can sign on to the suit for damages. Legal battles expose how some of America's deepest culture wars are bleeding into business. Venture capital funding gaps between the races is never a legal or moral justification to exclude certain men and women from public programs by race or ethnicity, Edward Blum, president of the American Alliance for Equal Rights, said to Inc. about the lawsuits last year. The American Alliance for Equal Rights believes it is legally permissible to provide benefits to businesses and individuals who are undersourced, but those benefits must be made available to all races and ethnicities. Let me see. I want to skip down. Let's see. I had it queued up, but government warning. Let's see if there's any other section on big banks drop DEI. Oh shit. Many other large financial institutions are shutting down their DEI-based investment programs. Last month, Goldman Sachs shut down its diversity-driven investment fund, which it funded in 2018, hoping to invest $1 billion in companies led by women of color. Advocates for DEI initiatives are starting to speak out. Earlier this month, more than a dozen trade groups representing minority business owners across the country sent a letter to Fortune 500 CEOs asking them not to give in to political pushback or the threat of legal action that should provide some semblance of hope for the founders on the front lines of this war against DEI. Yeah, I think there was a section I was looking for that talked about a number of other companies that had pulled out. I think that was it. Okay. So a number of companies are pulling out. That's basically what this is dealing with. So the Fearless Fund issue, as it relates to this blowback against DEI, is impacting the kinds of resources that many of these people have been used to getting. Now, on one end, as Black people, we can appreciate any kind of push to provide some type of equitable support, especially for a group that's been historically barred from being able to compete in many different ways. But at the same time, we've also witnessed that within the groups that were pushing for these resources and framing how those resources should be distributed, and mind you, we can make this association from companies like Fearless Funds all the way to BLM, and they were distributing some of that $90 million within the BLM network. None of it, as I reported on this show, none of it went to any Black male, especially heterosexual Black male led chapters of BLM. None of it. But we're seeing the same kind of logic happening in terms of these kind of entrepreneur support, programs and whatnot. But, So what we've been talking about on this channel since 2020 is how many of these programs have been developed for Black women only. Black men have been largely excluded. Matter of fact, we've had Black men come in here and report that the only time they were able to raise funds is when they hired or brought in a family member who was a Black woman to be the face of their company so that they could secure resources. And those were resources that weren't even from companies that were, outwardly targeting Black women, at least in the verbiage of their materials. And yet that was the only way many Black men could secure resources. And there haven't been any significant programs that we've found that are actively giving out resources to Black men entrepreneurs, whatever it may be. It's been solely earmarked for women, and women, as with those in the academy, as our letter pointed out earlier, and with many other spaces, have not said anything about, the dearth in Black men being able to access any of this. They've said nothing. And so now we're seeing a pushback from private interests trying to block any of the resources that they get. And I think Black men are in the same position we are about the MCU. I think we're largely indifferent. We were not invited to participate when the money was good. None of it was earmarked for us. But when the possibility of some of it was earmarked for us, these Black women led a nationwide assault on the very concept of it. And now they're pushing for it, and we're seeing private pushback. And in as much as Black men are paying attention to this at all, I think many of us are just fairly mute. Like, we didn't benefit from it one way or the other. We weren't earmarked for it. When there was conversation about it, we got attacked. So we're kind of just standing and watching. Now, I may be wrong. I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. Am I missing something? Do you think Black men are responding one way or the other in a whole different way than how I'm framing it? But from what I'm witnessing, there's a lot of silence. A lot of silence. Let me see. Kind of look through the comments. Catch up. But anyway, that's one of the things I'm noticing about this. We're indifferent because this was not earmarked for us to benefit in any measure. Not at all. We are starting to see, however, a number of things happen. Now, I'm not going to cover it in this show. I may do it in another, but we're starting to see a wave on social media of Black women apologizing to Black men. There have been a number of shows covering this, talking about these apology tours, as it's being, roughly termed, where Black men are starting to get this. Now, this short I played on my show before, this is what we're starting to see some Black women come forward and announce and acknowledge, I should say. Here we go.
Entrepreneurs are winning. Why do you think that is?
Ooh, you're not gonna like my answer. One thing that they did during slavery is that they made sure to emasculate the man, right? And then make the woman powerful. And the reason why they made the woman powerful is because primary caretakers of the babies. Mm-hmm. And we're gonna do everything that we can to make sure our babies live. Things are put in place so Black women can feel like they don't need a man.
So you think it's designed to
Absolutely.
Separate and conquer?
You can tell when there's not a father in the household. The kids carry themselves a different way. And you can see that they're lacking something, especially the boys. This narrative about being this independent Black woman, because you never hear another race say that. We need to get rid of that narrative. It shouldn't be one person over the other. You should be working
together
to build.
That's really the reason why we're doing so well.
Yes.
They're promoting it.
And
I think word is more palatable.
Right.
Black men, they're more their competition.
They are, and they are not afraid to speak their mind. So all of the grants, all of this stuff for Black women this, Black women that. But what about the men?
Okay. So there's some acknowledgement. And this is, I would put this alongside the apologies, right? Because there was little of this in 2020, 2021, when these resources seem to be pouring out of the heavens. And mind you, people are still going to jail for PPP loan fraud. People are still getting caught up in that. But what I'm saying to you is there was little of this acknowledgement then. As these resources are starting to be called into question, lawsuits are starting to come forward. Conservatives in particular are waging war against it. You got a lot of people running for cover. And all of a sudden, black men, we're a team again, right? I think this last 5 years has had as incredible an impact on the black community as, almost any. Black men are starting to observe where they actually fit in regard to being a priority, not only to the black community, but especially to black professional women. Well, I won't even limit it to professional women. I think a lot of this misandry has trickled down even into the club. I mean, it gets low. It gets low as far as this is concerned. And so we're seeing this kind of coming forward in this sense. Now, let me see here. Almost at the 2-hour mark. So what I'll do is I will drop a link and I will allow people to come through one at a time and just kind of give their thoughts, their experience with some of the things they saw, maybe some of the things I've covered. And if I've gotten something wrong, feel free to let me know. But I'm gonna drop the link. Make sure if you don't want to be on camera that you come prepared in terms of that. And these things here. I will let you come up and drop a word so that you can kind of frame some of these things we're talking about as far as black women are concerned. And this push for resources, have they driven black men away? First up, we got Nate. Nate, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear.
Okay, hold on, wait a minute. Let me fix the sound. Real quick. Okay. All right. Hello, Nate?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
You sound kind of far away.
I can hear me now. I'm better.
Well, you sound like you're far away and there's an echo. I don't know. It sounds like you're in a bathroom, but far away.
How about that? That's better. I think that's better music.
We'll try and go with that then. What are your thoughts about some of this stuff?
Basically, I've been noticing it for years. I'm from Atlanta, and it was a big push on DEI programs directed at black women. And I work in the telecom industry. That these true brothers, came together to start a business, and they got zero funds, zero. And I know a lot of me and stuff included on my own shirt networking company. And I'm seeing on TV, hey, black women getting this funds. I got black men in my family who need social benefits. They have disabilities. It's very hard for them to get any type of funds, even from any type of government. And I started to realize that, like I made a comment before, it seems like 80% of the resources from the government, black women are taking. From Section 8, from tax rebates, from single women and things like that. It's just a pattern, that I've been seeing.
Well, let me show you something. I want to get your thoughts on this. Here we go. So I don't know if you guys remember the actress Melinda Williams. She was in the Soul Food Show. I forget. She's been in a lot of stuff over the years. You had some background noise going. I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna mute you for a second, Nate, because you have some background noise. And then I'll unmute you to get your thoughts on this. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So this is actress Melinda Williams. She's launched a coding boot camp for women at HBCUs. Right. The caption reads: actress, author, entrepreneur, and founder Melinda Williams has launched a nonprofit initiative called the Esteem Project, designed specifically for women attending HBCUs. The Esteem Project, which is a part of her Arise and Shine Foundation, focuses on entrepreneurship, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. It's a 4-week virtual coding boot camp with an in-person HBCU kickoff weekend at Jackson State. If you're elected or selected, you'll receive a $1,000 scholarship, mentorship, and all an expense-paid trip kickoff weekend to Jackson, Mississippi. And isn't that interesting? Same state where we just reported on the deaths behind the prison where Black men's bodies are left out to rot. We have this going on. Interesting. During the boot camp, students will have the opportunity to participate in curated discussions, listen to motivational speakers, enjoy local cuisine, take part in exciting activities. The main goal is to show how coding, app development, and STEAM training can lead to success in various careers. By the end of the program, students will have acquired a new life in tech skills and will have built connections within a supportive sisterhood. Interesting. Boot camp will take place from May 31st to June 2nd in person, June 3rd to June 30th virtual. If interested, apply for the first cohort of the boot camp where you'll learn Apple's Swift UI. The application submissions open Monday. So here we have this kind of program starting in the same state where we're seeing Black male bodies tossed out to the sun, and buried in shallow graves. But this is what you have going on, while at the same time, we're starting to see these very types of programs falling apart, being sued, missing funding, going under, specifically because they've left everybody else out, including Black males. Any thoughts on this or anything related to it?
Yeah, it's a slap in the face, and I live close to Alabama, and it's a museum in Montgomery, Alabama that went to about 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
And it shows like a memorial of all the dead people who was hung up from Jim Crow and slavery. And when you go there, the first time I went, I started reading the names and I started to realize that 95% of the names, thousands of graves, are from Black men.
Yes.
There's just only a few names that you can mention across the world. Because I live, sometimes I live in different countries. It's ML King, Martin Luther King, and those type of men who died to change and give us the right to be on YouTube. Just imagine Jim Crow is still going on. We want to be on YouTube. The Black women want to have these opportunities and job opportunities. And I feel like it's a stab in the back.
Yeah.
I see my brothers out here, my own brothers suffering. People, the men in my family dying out here. Yeah. And we get, they talk to these politicians directly and say, hey, we want resources just for us. I mean, I've seen a YouTube channel of 3 women saying, hey, we want Black reparations for women, not just for men, just for women.
Right.
The misandry, man, I appreciate you so much about the misandry. When you start talking about it years ago, and I started to look even in my own family.
Yes.
The woman, they have events and things like that. And I just noticed they don't even invite the men in my family. It's just them.
Right.
The cookouts. And so I said, Mom, why you didn't tell me about this? Oh, I just forgot. But it happened over and over and over and over. I'm serious. I'm serious. And it's really a shame. But that's what's happening out here. When my female cousin needs some help, they help them. Oh, come on. When my cousin say, hey, I need a place to stay, I'm out here on the street. They don't get no help. Oh, you're a grown man.
Yes.
Figure it out.
Yes.
But it's crazy, man. And thank God my grandfather, he was born in the 1930s. He always told us, the Black men in my family and Black woman, hey, if you ever need a place to stay, you always welcome to come back in my house. You don't have to worry about paying nothing.
Yeah.
He was helpful and things like that. My grandmother, man, she was the same age with my grandmother. It's a disgrace to her memory as well. She loved Black men and was there for them. And these Black women out here saying, she don't know what the hell she was talking about. What? She didn't. Maintaining her family, cooking for her family, making sure they be in top supreme health, and it's just, it's a disgrace. I go to, I'm gonna be honest, I live half in Monterrey, Mexico. And the first thing I start to notice when I go to the malls and out here on the street and parks, the men are with the families intact.
Okay.
You know, and they are making it. They rip their families, and the women don't attack them, and they look at it like it's strange that the women are doing these type of things and not looking at with the men included. You know, they'll never say, "Hey, I want a resource only for us, women," and not include the men and the sons.
Now I'm gonna take you down, but I appreciate you coming in, Nate. Thank you for dropping that, man.
No problem.
And he's dead on. I mean, I remember even in my own family back in the 90s, you know, finishing school, I got a job, got an apartment, but I still need a little bit of help. Family said, no, you're a man, stand on your own. But I've seen cars, computers, apartments, all extended to the women in the family. When you even knew beforehand, it might be just dismissed and thrown in the trash. So that said, you know, this happens. Let me go ahead and bring in Ian. What's up, Ian?
Hey, what's good? What's good? Peace, bro. How you doing?
I'm good, man. How you been?
Man, I'm loving life, bro. Listen, this journey, man, this journey with you, man, has been life-changing, you know, life-affirming for Black men, man. I'm loving life, man, because, you know, seeing Black men more and more every day as human beings and some of the best human beings on the planet, bro, it's unbelievable, bro. It's unbelievable.
Oh, man, indeed. I see you got the Suave picture up, too. I ain't mad at you, man. I see how you doing it. But go ahead and drop a word on this real quick. What are your thoughts about this, man?
I mean, the resources, because you know, man, because I'm still around a lot of the people that's doing the reparations and stuff like that. So it was funny, just on Fox News, some of the people that I rock with, they just got mentioned by Tez Figaro, that's on the Breakfast Club. She was being interviewed, and she mentioned them. But that's beside the point is that I was in a space some time ago on Twitter, because they hold a lot of Twitter spaces teaching about reparations, so on and so forth. Now this brother come in and he says that Black men can recover from white supremacy. He said if the reason that we need reparations is the possibility that Trump gets in office and he does away with welfare for Black women and children. And as usual, I'm the lone person giving pushback and sees a problem with this John Henryism, where you say that Black men can bounce back from white supremacy, and the women and children are the ones that need to be prioritized with reparations, right? Oh, okay. So you know, as usual, I'm the only one in the space giving pushback. Another space, the California reparations bill, which you probably know something about. The sister came in because now they put in hair as part of the bill, right? You got this Protect Black and Women and Girls Act. You got the hair bill or whatever. They're putting that in the reparations bill. So this sister that's doing reparations and in the reparations, he comes on saying how important it is for this bill, for this hair, protecting the image of Black women in terms of hair, for that to be in the reparations bill. And she's saying that, oh, this is something important to Black women. And I said, first and foremost, if you're going to come in and kind of derail the conversation on reparations, right, and focus on Black women, at least understand that Black men are the ones who are majorly affected in terms of appearance value, in terms of being in corporate America, because we have to compare ourselves to the clean-cut white male, right? You know, clean-shaven, you know, buzz cut or whatever. Black women actually have more leeway when it comes to that. You know, when I gave some pushback, they should say, oh, yeah, it's Black women that are really the ones giving a hard time. But all that to say is...
Well, wait a minute. Before you move, look at this. Black teenagers suspended over dreadlocks in Texas heads to court in Crown Act case.
Yes.
And last I remember, they basically argued that him being discriminated against because of his locks was legal and allowed. And this has been going on for generations. I got a small piece on my blog written about this. Black men have been suing for hair discrimination for generations, because when you talk about being a police department, firefighter, if you have to stay clean shaven by policy, You know, we're dealing with bumps, we're dealing with ingrown hairs and a different kind of that daily skin shaving that you know, you've seen brothers that got that real serious road rash from that.
Yeah.
Black
Yeah.
men have been suing about that for generations. And I'm with you on this because I remember a black feminist coming to lecture at Fresno State, and she was so bold, she got up and argued that black women are the only group that deal with hair discrimination at all,
Wow.
ignoring generations of black men that have had to fight back against this very thing. So as you bring that up, it is currently in the news, a battle that's still being fought. And when you talk about hair discrimination in the black community, nobody talks about black men.
Nobody.
But go ahead. Yeah.
I mean, and like I said, unfortunately, this is where I'm at, because prior to, you know what I'm saying, I had no problem really, you know, I mean, I did have problems with relationship with black women, but as I get older and I get more and more understanding and understand how deeply disconnected black women are with the experience of black women, black men, I'm kind of losing my interest in kind of you know, prioritizing black women in terms of wanting to be in a relationship with them, because I'm like, you just really don't give a fuck about black men. And I remember, you know, you talked about in your class, you have white women and women of other races that come in and learn and want to learn about black men and their history, and black women just take it for granted as if they know us, but they don't prioritize us in any of their search for reparations, resources. They think that it's black women and children. But even then, you know, at least if you guys cared about the children, I could be like, okay, but y'all don't care about the children either. You don't care about our offspring. So let's stop.
Well, I think black girls is kind of the subconscious placeholder for kids. So I think there's a little bit of that, because if there's anything directed at black males, it's only through the auspices of children, but they don't conceptualize it for boys, right? So there's nothing given to boys that girls don't get, but there are things given to girls that boys don't get. And that's just supposed to be understood and accepted. So that solipsism we're talking about, where nobody exists but them, is a reality in terms of how they see the world.
Yes.
I'm gonna give you your closing thoughts, because I got a couple other people here. So what go ahead.
I mean, so essentially, man, you know, even when, you know, when I came into reparations, understanding and seeing how black women at all costs and under all circumstances would prioritize their survival, their economic and social survival. I mean, I'm past being hurt. I'm just looking now, what can we do about it? Because they want to do this DEI, because the DEI mostly is for white women and black women. That's not even for us. You know, when I was in the room with Sandy Darity, the lady that was hosting the space, she was going back and forth with me, talking about we need to get some lawyers on to kind of reverse what the Supreme Court did in terms of DEI. But I'm like, why not put all that energy in reparations, where it's an umbrella for black men and black women? But no, they just want it for themselves. So they'd rather tank reparations and get DEI, which barely moves the needle for black folks. So I'll land there.
All right, man. I appreciate you, man. Thanks for coming through, good brother.
I appreciate you, bro.
All right, man. Peace.
All right.
What he's talking about is actually, you know, the other term I've heard used in term when he was saying he was starting to pull away socially from black women. You know, what I'm hearing in the workplace, the term they're using for that is quiet quitting, right? Where you see people quiet quitting their jobs, even if they stay on their jobs, they're just doing the bare minimum, you know, and so on. That's what I heard when he started talking about withdrawing in that fashion, is this notion of quiet quitting. And I agree. I think there are many black men who are starting to do that. Shout out to Oppo. He says it's mighty unfortunate that these black women's organizations are under attack from these racist Oh, look, the 18-point black male political agenda. Shout out to you, man. Appreciate that. Let's see here. So we got Full Metal. Full Metal. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I just, as I was talking, got a notification on my phone from NBC News. It says Mayor of Birmingham advises black athletes to avoid Alabama colleges if anti-DEI bill passes. So this stuff is happening moment by moment. What are your thoughts about anything we've covered
Real
tonight?
time.
Anything related to it?
Uh, I want to stay on topic, but I want to come from a different angle.
Okay.
Allocating all the resources to the women. What happened to a generation of cats, of families being raised by spoiled brats?
Okay.
I've dealt with this myself personally, where I've seen my mother since I was a child, welfare, food stamps, SSI, WIC, whatever,
Mhm.
even get the house passed down to her from my grandparents.
Mm.
And just dealing with, I'm used to getting everything my way. Now think about our whole culture where we got tyrants in sole control and stewardship of the children from all of the resources allocated directly to them, not just from a political job level or anything like that. What did that do to the minds of the families, to the kids, when your mama is always unaccountable? She's a spoiled brat, and you have so many of them like this.
Well,
And
and
I'm like,
I think that's what happens when you have an environment where one demographic can do nothing good in the eyes of the community, and the other demographic cannot be checked. When you have that kind of dynamic in place, you end up with this kind of one-sided, kind of framework going on. But I'll let you get your closing thoughts. I have one other person in the queue. What
real
else? What
quick, I
would you
want
like
to
to close with?
I would like for you to do a show about your son and how important it is for men to start getting full custody of their boys.
Wow.
This is the only way anything. This is the only way anything is going to change. If we have stewardship of these boys, so we can control how they think and how we're going to raise them. As long as the women have control, it's going to be a never-ending cycle. But I'll let you go.
Hey man, I
All right, brother.
appreciate that, Full Metal. Thank you. Powerful. Just for the sake of transparency, I didn't get custody of my son. I'm a widower, so I had him. But I get the point he was making. I'm not talking about what Full Metal said. I just want to make sure I'm clear. So if anybody else raises that, you understand where I'm coming from. But appreciate that, Full Metal. Ona, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Your camera's on. Do you want it on? Okay, here we go. Is it Ona? You're muted. You gotta unmute. We can't hear you.
I said I'm gonna turn my camera off for the time being because my hair ain't done.
Oh, okay. Did you want to drop a word on this?
Yeah, I just want to say, first of all, you have a very soothing voice, I must say.
Okay. Thank you.
You don't come off as the typical. But I just also want to say a lot of people might ask, oh my God, why are you over here? How did you find this channel? I'm a Black woman and I go to the YouTube search. I don't think a lot of people know this, but I look up things for Black women. A lot of Black women do. So if you go to the YouTube search, you will type in Black woman and you type in live stream, filter it, and then a whole lot of people, it would be titled Black women are disgusting, Black women are this, Black women are that, Black women. So I typically watch things that are dedicated to Black women. That's how I find these type of channels. But anyway, as a Black woman, I'm gonna calm down because my hair is a little messy. But I just want to say, as far as these, sorry, I'm like a little high. So as far as these types of videos, I just think it's very laughable because you can't, I just think it's weird that we fought for generations to not be judged based on the surface of our skin, based on our image. It's like us Black people, we can't get away from racism. Now we live in this new generation where we finally come as one. These new generation of white people are not judging us based on the color of our skin. They're more inclusive. And now we have inverted. I have to say this is only online because I don't get Black men who judge me based on the color of my skin.
Hold on a second, Ona. But we're talking today about policy, and we're talking about resources that are extended on the basis of gender and how that's impacting the Black community. Do you have
There
any
is no
thoughts
Black
about that?
community. In order
Okay.
to have a community, you have to like belong to people. Like we've never belonged to you guys. Like it's so weird when y'all keep saying our woman. Like you guys never had any authority over us. You guys never had any power. We've always belonged and have always been property of white men. Now, if you want to move on to this generation, we're free. It's not like back in the day, even when feminism was a thing, when women didn't have rights, we still wasn't enslaved by Black men. Black men still had no authority over us. When you saw those movements back in the day, they were predominantly white women because white men ruled everything. So like it's so uncomfortable when you say our woman as if you guys ever had any type of like it's so weird. And what community? Like a broken community. When slavery ended, our race was supposed to end. We were only meant to be property and slaves. Like it's like we are dysfunctional. And we would never ever be a thing because we was not meant to be a community. We were not meant to thrive. We got out of being slaves, and the whole world wanted us dead. We were not meant to be here, but for somehow we thrived because a group of white people felt sorry for us, and they ended slavery, and they fought, and a lot of them died during the Civil War because it's like you guys keep going.
Okay, Ona, you got about 10 more seconds because I got to close the show. So
I'm done, but I just want to say hi and welcome to, I guess, because I just found your channel because you're just another Black man who's going to be going 10 years from now talking about us. It's just weird. Like, I think you should go on with your life.
Oh, thank you. Now, here's the thing. For those who are content creators, I let her talk for a reason. Feel free to capture and do what you got to do. Clip it. That's the reason I let her talk uninterrupted, because I wanted you guys to be able to have access to that. Now, as far as this kind of blowback that some of us are getting from these trolls about, you're just talking about whatever. We're not talking about this because of our women or any of that bullshit. What we're talking about is policy. What we're talking about is what I called a couple of years ago social gentrification. It's when you have another community that can come into your space, literally buy off whole demographics by offering them peanuts and dismantle a community from within. Now, we can debate back and forth about how much the Black community saw itself as a community, ever identified as a community, so on and so forth. But I'll tell you this, a lot of this blowback came in with the rise of feminism and the courting of Black women by white women and by Western resources. Now, that in and of itself began the splitting from within. And why is that relevant? Well, when you had the advent of global media through magazines and newspapers, you had this small Black community, right, that were on camera getting bitten by dogs. And now all of a sudden in the 1960s, people all around the world wanted to know what we had to say. And for the most part, that Black community, at least in terms of public media and the outcries for justice, were consolidated. This is why the 1970s was filled with every ideological group possible coming within the Black community and dismantling it from within. And this is something that you're not going to find articulated any more clearly than Bobby Wright, which you can find right here on YouTube. Dr. Bobby Wright, psychologist, gets in and breaks down in just a few minutes the impact of the 1970s. And it was a complete reversal of the 1960s. And it had to do with buying off demographics of the Black community, from women to students, across the board, from class to gender, sexuality to color. Every dynamic you can think of was used after the 1960s to make sure that there was no coherent, articulated political position that came from the Black community, especially one that seemed united in its focus. And it has succeeded, in my assessment, in terms of breaking apart the Black community from within. So we're accounting from an area that has not gotten much pushback in the last 5 decades. We're accounting for how this functioned on gender terms. And I'll leave you with this. The reason it's so important to discuss this on gender terms is because for every other type of disassociation that Black community witnessed coming in and trying to dismantle from within, nothing is as formidable as breaking down family formation. Get this and understand it well. If you're talking about different political ideologies, right, left, you're talking about religion, whatever religion you choose, all of those things can be sources of dismay. But when you have one that actually breaks down family formation, no community can continue beyond that. And so I wanted to come onto YouTube to give Black men the vocabulary to break down what has happened and what is continuing to happen, because we're at a critical time where we're actually witnessing these resources that Black women have been lured with for generations now starting to be withdrawn right in front of us. And we're starting to see the impact it's having. Shout out to Lewis. He says you can't make this up with the fee beast. It is what it is. Yeah. Yeah, it is what it is. But I'm not worried about it. And I played the clip for a reason. Go ahead and chop it up, fellas. Clip it. It's all yours. Yeah. Other than that, y'all have a good one. I'm going to go ahead and figure out what to get into tonight. So I appreciate you guys supporting, and give us your thoughts about this whole question of resources. Let me know in the chat. What do you think about it? Is it happening? Do you think we missed something? Do you have something to add? Or do you have a personal story, or at least something you've observed, that gives us another insight about these things that we're seeing, right? That you're not seeing published in any magazine or newspaper. You're not seeing movies about it or television shows. And if you ask certain people, they'll tell you you're imagining it, and they'll gaslight you about it. But I can reassure you that there are too many Black men that have the same story for it to be smoke. There is fire, and I want to hear more of it. So if you have any of those stories to share, feel free to do so. Y'all have a good one. Peace. I am here to tell you, brothers, we are not criminals by birth, perennial rapists, incapable intellects, man-children, sperm donors, child support wellsprings, success objects, walking phalluses, ATM machines, lottery tickets, unintelligent henchmen, valueless assassins, pro bono mercenaries, unpaid bodyguards, interchangeable stepfathers, child discipline proxies, unpaid repairmen, workhorses, emotional tampons, or any other socially accepted dehumanizing stereotype. We are thinkers, inventors, innovators, leaders, fathers, and men. Embrace your humanity, know your worth, and extend your time, attention, and resources only to those who genuinely respect you. And remember, your worth is not defined by meeting other people's narcissistic and selfish and unrealistic needs. You define your worth. Peace.